In some ways, I think that our speaker needs no introduction, but maybe I can update you a little bit on some of what she'll be sharing with us. Our speaker today is Susan Russell Freeman, a member of our club. And I think, as most of you know, Susan was executive director of VEEP for just under 40 years. Under her direction, VEEP expanded and created programs to meet the needs of low-income people in Bloomington, Edina, Richfield, and South Minneapolis. What you may not know is that Susan now leads the newly formed Foundation for Essential Needs, and she's here to tell us all about the foundation's work. So, Susan, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes.
It is good to be back. And if you enjoyed that, please know I had absolutely nothing to do with it but to stay out of the way. That was done by Michelle Donahue. She is our social media consultant and a frustrated teacher of me. Poverty is costly for everyone. Study after study reports that communities who do have safety nets for those at risk actually spend less dollars on negative outcomes of poverty. At FFEN, we know there's multiple ways to work toward meeting basic needs. But our organization has chosen to focus on those organizations that offer an immediate impact to people experiencing an economic crisis. And to further focus, FFEN feels that it is food shelves that can offer that valuable and essential service to the community. But we often know, at least I have known for about 40 years, that these very organizations can be challenged, that have barriers with their own stability. I've always felt it's a sad irony that the very organizations who are focused on economic stability for those they serve are themselves challenged with sustainability, often because of the myth that poverty organizations can operate on a shoestring. They don't need infrastructure. They don't need professional staff, and they certainly don't need up-to-date technology or equipment. Yet those are the things that for-profit organizations would never think of going without. During my time at VEEP, I had the opportunity to be on many task force and economic study groups who I also shared the table with directors from statewide hunger relief and anti-poverty organizations, both public and private. And through that time, I began to learn more and more about this very challenge that was happening throughout the state of Minnesota. There are 300 and plus food shelves in the state of Minnesota. They serve 87 counties. When I left VEEP on April 30th and started FFEN on May 1st, I had to go from knowing about Hennepin County to 87 counties. And I have enjoyed getting lost throughout the state of Minnesota for the last 8 months. But what I also knew was that these groups were able to provide resources and oversights to the food shelves. There are seven regional food banks in the state of Minnesota. There are 11 organizations that oversee the county human services, and there are 24 regional areas for the CAP, otherwise Office of Economic Opportunity. These three agencies are the agencies that can provide both a boon and a bane to food shelves, and I learned that firsthand. Regional food banks have the ability to bring fresh food to food shelves throughout the state. A little primer, a food bank is a wholesale, a food shelf is a retail. And the food banks have access to not only major donations from corporations, they also have access to what we used to call USDA commodities or surplus food. In today's world, that is treated very much like commodities trades on Wall Street. Because of that, here in Minneapolis, there's a guy over in St. Paul trading Minnesota surplus commodities with New Mexico, with Oregon, with Maine, which means that food shelves in the state of Minnesota have the ability to have fresh and nutritional food available year-round. With that comes compliance, as it should, and also the ability to oversee that food shelves are being run safe and that they have what they need. And that is run by the Office of Economic Opportunity. And they have created something called CAP, C-A-P, CAP programs. And it was in 1967 when I joined a fledgling organization called VISTA. I was assigned to a CAP program in Florida. And so I've been working with groups like this ever since. The first thing I did when I started at FFEN is I went to these groups throughout the state, because the bane side of it is they were also creating rather rigid rules in which a food shelf, often run by all volunteers in the basement of a church with shoestrings, could provide this service. And the compliance issues and the reporting issues were a major challenge for them. And I heard over my time with these group organizations in the last 10, 15 years of the food shelves that were challenged and the food shelves that some of them were even going to close. And so when I approached them from FFEN decided that this was going to be pretty much our focus. I said, partner with me. Instead of closing them, nominate them as a grantee. And they did. And so these groups are all now food partners with us. FFEN has a unique approach to granting. We do three things. We work with monetary grants, service grants, and then we end with collaboration. Our mission is to provide financial and professional support to strengthen the infrastructure and outcomes of Minnesota community-based food shelves. Our new partners are our nominators. I've been working with them since May, and we have 2 cycles of granting throughout the year. And it only took 1 round of granting before these nominators picked up on it, and they now told me they have their next 3 rounds ready for me. So I just received our first round of prospects for 2016. They are nominating 2 kinds of shelves throughout the state. They're nominating challenged shelf, challenged by the areas that we talked about, but in underserved areas, or the other side of that is large, very well-run organizations, like one called Veep, but may face a unique problem. And what we're looking for, and what they nominate them for, is areas of staff development, technology, organizational efficiency, whether it be equipment or outcomes for clients, marketing or awareness of the need in the community, and then obviously community involvement and community engagement. So those are the 5 areas in which a food bank director or a person from OEO or a CAP agency can nominate a local food shelf. Once they are nominated, then I reach out to them and ask them to write an LOI, a letter of intent. And we changed it. We made it very, very simple because I've had to write these over the year, and it can be very daunting. And now we're approaching food shelves who nobody has ever come to them and asked them to write a grant. Nobody's ever offered to work with them. And in fact, one of them put me into spam so many times because she thought we were first a scam, and secondly, who gives away free money? And thirdly, I don't have time to do this. I'm too busy. I don't know how to write a grant. I have too many problems. So this was all via email. So I finally said to her, would you talk to me? And she said, I have 10 minutes on Thursday at 11 o'clock, call me. I said, okay. So I called her, and at 12:30, I had to hang up. Once she found out who we were, the floodgates opened, and then I heard everything. And so they first are guided through this. And the interesting thing is, the nominators often nominate them for one thing, and when we finally hear back from them, it has nothing to do with it. My very reticent grantee, Diane, I said, well, you've been nominated for to receive a freezer. She says, what the hell? I'm in a convenience store, an old convenience store. I got freezer coming out my ears. And she said, we don't even have a damn phone line or internet. And we don't have broadband up here. So what we think of as normally here is something that you run into out there. It's not unusual when I get out of the car, wherever I am, the first thing I do is look on my phone to see how many bars I actually have. So it's a little different world out there. Once they go through that, we do something very different. We do a site visit immediately. We don't wait for them to write the proposal. We immediately go visit with them to find out what their real needs are and to let them know we really care about what's going on. And we're not there to provide oversight. We're there to try to understand the great work they're doing and how they've been doing it. Many for 18 years or more, 30 years, all volunteers. And all they're being told by other people is, you do it this way, do it that way, or we'll close you down. So it's been kind of a life-changing for me, too, to be able to sit with these people in a variety of areas and know what they're going through. It starts with a monetary grant. It can be one thing. It can be a scale, or a computer, or a generator. During the proposal process, what FFEN tries to establish is a baseline that we can actually measure the before and after. How accurate were reports after receiving a commercial scale? This food shelf was in an old warehouse, multiple rooms. They had scales in every room. By the time they got people through and weighed it, it was like the game of telephone. You had so many multiple weights, and the food bank was threatening to close them down because their records were so awful. They were right. They were terrible. They couldn't adequately weigh what was coming in and what was going out. One scale, a commercial scale, allowed them to weigh the food once, coming in and going out, and they immediately got out of trouble. And once they were able to do that, I was able to sit down with them and talk to them about other things like community engagement to begin to bring in more dollars that could provide support. Most of the food shelves in the state of Minnesota are very well supported with food, but it's the infrastructure that people do not see as needing to go there. Sometimes monetary grants are sufficient, and other times money may not be the need. A food shelf is forced to let their director go after 20 years, and yet they've never had an experience to hire because she's been the only one there. Another food shelf knows they need a good information system, but they really don't know what they don't know. I'm in that case a lot myself, which is why I just surround myself by good people. The food shelf that was forced to hire or to let their director go because of some egregious not personal things, but again, reporting and just absolutely unable to do the job. They had never hired anybody. They had never, ever hired anybody. So FFEN went in. We worked with them on a job. They asked for money. I took a look and I said, let's just sit down and talk. And so that's exactly what we did. We wrote the job proposal. I posted it. We vetted the applicants. We put them together in a matrix for them to interview. They did all the interview. They chose the hire. We wrote the letter for them, and then we met with them to begin training and also set up a year of introducing the director throughout the community in order to garner more support. And now we're going back in and doing a gap analysis with the board. We have not spent one dime. But I know every Dairy Queen between here and that community. Another important part that we do once we get into a community is community engagement piece. The minute I have the opportunity to visit, I began to look around to see who else is in that community and how are they involved and have they been involved and what can they do. I was walking down the main street of this very small town with the chairman of the board. We'd just gone to have coffee at the Muddy Moose, and we were heading back to the food shelf. And we were turning around the corner, and there's a very nice building on the corner. Very nice. It was the nicest building in the community. And I said, do you know these people in here? And he said, no. And I said, well, look, their names are right here. Look, they're on these very beautiful plaques. I bet, they're attorneys or accountants. He said, yeah, they are. I said, let's go get them. They're right across the street from you. Let's invite them to the Muddy Moose. And another thing that I do everywhere I go, I first ask to see if there is a Rotary. This is the Rotary in Detroit Lakes. That is Ed, the director, or the president of the Detroit Lakes Rotary. In November, on an icy, cold day, at the noon Detroit Lakes, there were 85 people. And I introduced myself, and they were amazed that their food shelf was having problems. So what I'm doing everywhere I go is, I'm keeping this, I'm stealing this, sorry, I'll bring it back. I take the food shelf director and the chairman of the board, and we go to Rotary. And if we don't go to Rotary, we go to the Lions or the Boosters. And one of the groups that we're in, their Rotary said they don't support the food shelf because they didn't know they had any need. But yet you know that Rotaries are there to support. And so it's been just really wonderful to watch that kind of support happen, and it's already happening in some of the places that I've been. We don't have all the Rotary shots up because, unfortunately, we're using my skill at taking them. So, the last area that the foundation gets involved with is probably the one that I feel very strongly about. It's collaboration. To me, collaboration is the ultimate success for a food shelf and those they serve. Just a little chronology. In December of 2014, we actually awarded 5 grants. Well, before I moved there full-time, I was a consultant. So I was doing 2 jobs. But we did do a round of granting in 2014. And we gave a small food shelf up in Otter Tail County an information system to better track their clients and needs and volunteer hours and donor, once again, so they could do better reporting, so they could report back to their donors, so they had the right demographics. I went back there in March to begin working with them to see how it was going, and we started talking about outcomes. And at that point, I shared with, and this was a very wonderful open board, and I began to share with them my theory and assumptions around hunger. And you don't do that right away. You have to wait till you get to a point that people will really sit down and listen to you. And my assumptions about hunger. Hunger isn't about food. It's about resources. People use food shelves because they are hungry. People are hungry because they don't have enough food to eat. People don't have enough food to eat because they don't have enough money to buy that food. Possibly they're unemployed or underemployed. They may not be able to work because of illness, disability, underage or too elderly, or they had unexpected expenses. People cannot solve hunger by food alone. They need resources. And people cannot access and utilize resources alone. When you're in a crisis, is the last time you're going to be able to figure out all the resources you need to come out of that crisis. So I proposed a potential pilot that I had heard of before. In fact, I did it at Veep. So we decided to make a mini Veep in this and do it in a very measured way that we could hopefully model. I went back to our early partnerships. I went to the CAP agencies up in Otter Tail County. I went to the county agencies, and I went to the local United Way. And I asked them, I met with each one of them individually. I talked to them through my assumptions, and I talked to them about resources. And bless their hearts, they came to the table with this little tiny food shelf. And we worked from March all the way through to September. And by the time September came around, we had 8 more groups at the table, and I was no longer doing the talking. I was just there serving the coffee, actually. That's what I was doing, and cleanup. They took this, understood the importance of resources, and put their own stamp on it and created their own collaborative. On October 1 of this year, a CAP staff person from 30 miles away came 1 day a week to this little tiny food shelf. And she started out by just working alongside the volunteers. Not just sitting there talking about that she was a government agency, but that working alongside the volunteers. And started talking about the programs they offered. Fuel assistance is huge. So starting in October, that was a good time to do that. Plus there's Head Start, MNsure, and a few other things out there that are important. On their own, they took their show on the road into that little tiny town, same town where that big building with really cool accountants and attorneys were there. They went to the grocery stores, they went to the libraries, they went to the schools, and they went to the turkey rendering plant, which is where many of the potential clients worked. And by December, 3 months later, they serve about 100 people, 100 families a month. That was their. Now, just to give you a comparative, Veep, as far as I remember, serves about 200 families a day. So it was a mini. But this is 100 families. Driving, though, when you think about it, driving from anywhere from 30 to 50 miles in many of these places. By the end of December, she had signed 50 families up for fuel assistance, Head Start, many who had never, ever put their children into school before, and MNsure. Last week, or starting in March, now the county's going to go in, and they're going to be working with food stamps. We are measuring each little thing along the way. And the United Way is in there helping with some resources. And when I was back up there, I also attended the Pelican Rapids Rotary. And they are now going to step in this summer, so I'm going back up to work with them. So that's kind of a very big, important part that what we do. One of the final things that we do in a continuing collaboration is once a food shelf becomes a grantee of the foundation, their food shelf director is invited to a virtual chat room. It's called Food for Talk. And it's a private Facebook page that you don't have to be on Facebook to be invited. But none of the regulatory agencies can be there. Your executive director can't be there. Your board chair can't be there. It's just you. And that allows them then to have a wonderful place to talk. And many of them now are doing peer-to-peer support. Last year, we awarded grants of only $20,000, but the service grants amounted to $58,000, and that's our time. This year, we are already starting with our next round, and our reach is going even further. I think we have some little dots up there about the reach. So we are excited to move. I am learning my way around the state as we go, and I thank you. We have something I want to hand out because this is the Rotary. Do you have the cards? One of the things I'm going to ask for your help is introducing me to Rotaries. We think that there are a lot of Rotaries in the state of Minnesota. I even have a list, but there's nothing like a personal introduction. So Michelle is going to be handing out these cards that will let you fill out if you know who a Rotarian is. If you have a lake place, a second home, I would like to know where it's at, just because I know you want to hear from me. And we would welcome any kind of input that we can get. Thank you. I'll take one question.
Thank you. So Susan, will you stay around for any questions that people may have? Thank you so much. And Susan, I do want to, in appreciation for your speaking today, a donation to End Polio will be made in your name to End Polio Now, which is the signature project of Rotary International. So in the early 1980s, there were 400,000 cases of polio in the world each year, and Rotary decided to join with other organizations to lead the eradication of polio. We are so close to eradicating this devastating disease. We've had 5 cases in 2006, all in Pakistan. 2016, all in Pakistan. At this time last year, we had 14 cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we are about a third of what we were last year in polio. So success over polio will help fuel the energy for what people of the world can do when we work together. And so here is a certificate in honor of your speaking today. And here is, you probably already have one of these.
Oh, but I want to know.
Okay. Thank you so much.